I feel like this is going to be a quick one because what I want to talk about isn't really news, but I think I should talk about how it's not news and how we shouldn't be concerned about this non-news, because Nick Kypreos wrote an article for the Toronto Star, and in that article that is titled "Dominant Panthers Prove Winning a Stanley Cup Starts at the Top. The Maple Leafs Should Take Note." There's a whole article on the Panthers winning and how the Leafs can learn lessons from all that stuff, but that's not what I want to talk about at all. What I want to talk about is the end of the article where Nick Kypreos writes in the Toronto Star. He has a little thing called Kipper's Corner. And then there you get little blurbs and news and notes and some reporting there. And we got yesterday in this article a little reporting on Matthew Knies and the current contract negotiations between him and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Matthew Knies is an RFA. He's a restricted free agent. He needs a new contract, but his rights are tied to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So he can't go anywhere. He is subjected to, he can be subjected to an offer sheet. He would have to sign that offer sheet. We'll get into all that stuff. What Nick Kypreos said about the Matthew Knies negotiations with the Leafs is that a few eyebrows are being raised with no announcement of a new contract for RFA Matthew Knies as we inch closer towards July 1st. Some early indications point to a very large ask by the Knies camp, and the Leafs could be reluctant to give in at this point. It may also indicate a new philosophy on being tougher when it comes to handling young star players' money and term like the previous regime. Focus in on a couple different things there. Let's start with the first sentence. A few eyebrows are being raised with no announcement of a new contract for RFA Matthew Knies as we inch closer to July 1st. No one is concerned. I don't think anybody should be concerned and raising eyebrows. The season ended about a month ago. There are business to get done for the Leafs in terms of trades and the draft and figuring out what their cap is going to look like for next season. And there's no rush to do the Matthew Knies RFA deal in early June. It's June 20th, 21st, 22nd, whenever you're watching or listening to this. We should not feel antsy right now about the Matthew Knies contract not being done. There's plenty of time to get it done. You have the entirety of the offseason. If this was weeks before training camp and Knies was still not signed, then we're getting a little antsy. If it's mid to late August, yeah, but like the Leafs have a lot of business to do with their current cap situation. They don't have a lot of forwards locked up long term, and they need to figure out what they are doing, and the negotiations take time. This isn't an easy negotiation because Matthew Knies can shoot for the moon, and that's the next sentence we'll get to. Let's go to the next one because that's the first thing. Second thing, I was going to bleed into that with the next couple comments I have on this. So the second part that we need to get into, some early indications point to a very large ask by the Knies camp, and the Leafs could be reluctant to give in at this point. That is a good thing. That is a very good thing that Nick Kypreos reported there. First of all, that's how negotiations work. Matthew Knies should start these negotiations at $10 million a season. That is how every one of you, when you're negotiating anything, shoot for the moon when you first start these negotiations. If Matthew Knies has a very large ask in early June, mid-June, late June, that is okay. That is a good thing. That is how you do negotiations. And the fact that the Leafs are reluctant to give up, even at this point, is par for the course. That is exactly how the negotiation should work. Matthew Knies should ask for a lot. The Leafs should say, no, let's get to a reasonable number. Here's our little bit number. You want $2 million? Let's meet somewhere in the middle. It sounds like normal negotiations, so I don't understand if this is being reported as like trouble. I hope it's not supposed to be taken like that. I'm reading that as, yeah, that's not even news because that's just how negotiations work. In the last sentence there, it also may indicate a new philosophy on being tougher when it comes to handling young star players' money and term like the previous regime. So the Leafs aren't going to be Kyle Dubas. And I don't think when Brad Treliving wakes up in the morning, he puts on his glasses and he says, oh my goodness, I looked in the mirror and I'm Kyle Dubas. Brad Treliving isn't Kyle Dubas. Brendan Shanahan is also not within the organization anymore. This isn't the same regime, and they don't have the same philosophy. It's not a new philosophy for the organization because it's new people. You know, it's not like the Brad Treliving has to change from the Kyle Dubas philosophy. He never had it because he's not that person going through these negotiations. He doesn't have to change from the Brendan Shanahan philosophy of giving these guys what they want because Brendan Shanahan's not there anymore. This is a Brad Treliving negotiation entirely. The only guy above him now in the organization is Keith Pelley, and Keith Pelley I don't think is going to be meddling in the Matthew Knies RFA negotiation. This is Brad on his own. He hasn't shown any indication that he's willing to just give Matthew Knies $10 million, so I don't think that's something to be concerned about, that they're going to act like this is the Mitch Marner, William Nylander, Austin Matthews negotiations where it's a blank check and we will give in. And I know that a lot of Leaf fans are scared of RFA negotiations, and there's probably over the next couple of weeks going to be a lot of people trying to stoke those fears of Leafs fans and saying, oh, the Matthew Knies thing isn't happening. What is going on here? But those Mitch Marner negotiations, they were tough because they gave him everything, and we saw how that whole thing played out, and now he's gone. The William Nylander negotiations were probably the worst of the bunch. The Marner one, considering how much money they gave, that's a debate for a different day, but the William Nylander negotiations were terrible. They went to the final day in December. It wasn't signed until the very last moment he could play that season. It was for all of the money he wanted. It was for the same deal that was offered in September. It was a complete waste of time to waste his season. And after he signed that deal in December, the rest of his season was just out the window because he didn't play for half the year, and then he was supposed to play in the regular season. He couldn't do it, and that was terrible. Kyle Dubas and that last regime, Kyle Dubas and Brendan Shanahan, have a terrible track record of RFA negotiations. They fail time and time again with the core of this team. They are not here anymore. We should not worry about history repeating itself when those people are not managing this team. And in terms of an offer sheet being offered to Matthew Knies, nobody should be worried about Matthew Knies accepting an offer sheet. Teams can offer Matthew Knies an offer sheet. In order for it to go through and for him to have that offer on the table, he has to sign it first, and then the Leafs can go in and match, or they can take the draft picks or whatever it is. There's no indication that Matthew Knies wants to sign that offer sheet from another team because he is a valuable member of this team, and eventually Matthew Knies will sign his new deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, will it be a long-term contract or a short-term contract? Will it be for a little bit too much money on a shorter deal, or will it be for a little bit of money on a longer-term deal? That is the true questions and where we can debate this deal and what looks like a good deal or not. Personally, I think you go long-term, you go keep that AAV down because you go long-term. That's where I think you have to go with Matthew Knies. I assume Matthew Knies wants to go shorter and a lot of money because that's the best for his career. And I think you fight, if you're Brad Treliving, to go long-term, keep the AAV down a little, and lock up this player who can be your first-line left winger for many, many years. Hopefully 7-8 years on a 7-8 year deal for Matthew Knies. Let me know what you think a good deal for Knies looks like and whether you are concerned about these negotiations, because I am not concerned in the least about this getting done. I think it gets done eventually. It's just a matter of when this offseason we get the notification that Matthew Knies has re-upped with the Toronto Maple Leafs. That is it for me right now. Let me know what you think in the YouTube comments on the Jesse Blake Sports Report YouTube channel. While you're there, hit like and hit subscribe on the channel. Thank you for being here. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to be listening or watching right now, and I appreciate you for that. Good night from Toronto.